Today, let's talk about you. This is Shady Bonsai. Welcome back to Shady Bonsai, everybody. Just a refresher here. When I talk about shady, I'm talking about between 3 to 4 hours of sunlight. That's what my yard gets here. And I had to figure out what grows here. That's what this channel is all about. It's about figuring out what will grow here in this yard, my specific microbiome here in Minnesota, in pretty heavy shade, maybe do a little bit partial shade in one little spot where my trees will actually grow. And when I started down this process, one of the things I did was look online to find out what are people saying about what will grow here. Looking at some of the online resources were kind of discouraging. You know, people either had no advice or they had bad advice. People were saying things, places like Bonsai Nut Forum, which is a great forum, but people had asked, what can I grow in the shade? And they were getting answers like, junipers and pines. But that's kind of ridiculous, you guys. Those are two sun-loving species. If we look at them biologically, horticulturally, they are species with very high sun needs. And people did chime in right away and say, no, don't grow those, to the person who was asking that question. But I think sometimes what people mean by shade is colored by their microbiome of where they live, or just their macrobiome of the state they live in. You know, here in Minnesota, even on the summer solstice, the highest the sun gets in the sky is 68 degrees. So 45 degrees is halfway up in the sky, 90 degrees is straight up. So, 68 degrees is somewhere around here. That's the highest up the sun is going to be. If you're in somewhere like Orlando, Florida, on the solstice, the sun is like 98 degrees overhead. It's virtually straight overhead at noon during the solstice. So in the summer, depending on where you are, it's not just, literally how much of that sun is reaching the location, but also how high is the sun in the sky, how intense is the sun in the sky. If you live in Southern California, you may be constantly putting shade cloth over your junipers and your pines and thinking, oh, these trees need shade. They're still sun-loving species. They absolutely will not grow in a yard with as much shade as I have here. I know the previous homeowners who lived here had, just a couple years before we moved in, planted several like blue spruce back here in this area. And by the time I moved in, they were completely dead. And these were probably, they were pretty good sized trees. They may be $300 a piece. They had dropped on these things at a garden center, and they were out nearly $1,000 on those trees because they didn't fully understand the horticulture of what will grow in an environment like this. And that's part of what I'm trying to learn, is not just what can grow here, but what can grow well here as a bonsai in a pot, and also what can I keep alive over the winter here. So the first thing that came to mind is this plant right here is yew. When we think about bonsai, one of the first things people have to think about is evergreens. Now, there's lots of great deciduous species to grow. I'm experimenting with some deciduous species. We're gonna be showing those here on the channel. But evergreens is what, a lot of people think of when they're thinking about bonsai. So naturally, I want to be able to experiment with those and see what can be grown. And I can't grow junipers here really, although I do have, right back here actually, some cedars that have been growing here so long. They probably were planted back when there were some sun. Because they're established, they're sort of maintaining themselves, but they're not really growing a whole lot. This little guy back here, I think you can kind of see right here, maybe it kind of blends into the background. I do have 2 junipers back here, but growing junipers is very difficult. I do have one juniper project I'm working on that we'll see if it survives. So I'm experimenting with everything because I do have a couple of junipers in the yard, but generally they really want that full sun, and I just don't have that here. I know that yews will grow in my yard. They are one of the few evergreen species that will grow in the shade. So that's what I've been experimenting with. I have 2 of them in pots that I want to show you. Don't get too excited. They're just experiments. They're very small, but trying to see what will grow here. So let's take a look at those. Here it is. Okay, let me give you a little tour. Checking out, move the little mud man down here, take him out. A little gift from my wife. There's some nice nabari growing on here. Okay, got some roots developing in the back as well. Little shari feature. I think a young branch got ripped off at some point. It's kind of what drew me to the tree. It had something a little different going on. I've been styling it in a bit of a windswept look. I just took some of the wire off this morning because I noticed it was digging in, but this really should be down here. Look, it's not important. This tree is not finished. It needs a lot of work. Here's what it looked like when I picked it up in May of 2024 for $10 at Home Depot. You can see some of these first photos of what it looked like. You know, I've been experimenting with styling. I haven't done a lot of windswept, so it's something I thought would be kind of fun to try. This is not an amazing tree, but I picked it up because it was cheap. It was $10. I did check this spring. They still have the $10, you know, special at Home Depot. They wheel in on carts and they'd leave them out front and forget to water them. They were almost all dead by the time I saw them this year. But this one was pretty healthy when I picked it up. And again, for 10 bucks, I figured, you know what, I'm gonna get it purely to see if I can overwinter it. Will my idea for an overwintering strategy work? Because my old one didn't work and the trees had all died here, as I said. I now have a 3-season porch, and I figured out that I can put the trees on the 3-season porch. It drops cold enough in there over the winter, really kind of an ideal temperature, probably 38, 39 degrees, maybe 40. The trees go dormant, but it's not so cold that you start to damage the roots and get them to die. So I think it's going to be a really good strategy for keeping the trees alive, is to keep them on that 3-season porch. So this was in there all last winter and it survived. And maybe kind of say, you know what, maybe I can do bonsai here in this yard if I have the right species. So yew is definitely a contender. This one is just your sort of run-of-the-mill cheap yew you're going to pick up somewhere like Home Depot. And if you look at it, let me show you here. These needles, they're pretty big, not giant, but pretty big sized. And really, it's not ideal. I'd love something with a little bit smaller needles. So let me show you what you can also pick up. You can get a Japanese yew. It looks like this. All right, I'm back. I've got a tree, sort of a bush in my lap here. It's still in its pot. This is the, what do they call this? Emerald spreader Japanese yew. Picked one of these up. Size-wise, look at the size of these needles. These are much smaller. That's what you're gonna get with a Japanese yew, is a smaller needle size. Now this was more expensive than the $10 Home Depot special, but it's ultimately gonna be more fun to work with. And I'll get you a shot down in here so you can see kind of what we're working with. This has got a trunk in here. Can you see that there? That's what we're working with. It's got some nice movement in there, okay? I did do a little bit of work on this because you can see this light spot down here. There was another trunk coming out right there that I removed just so we get down to just the one trunk. This has not really been styled. It hasn't been shaped or anything. The big thing I want to see is just wait a year on this. What is its growth habit like? I'm trimming up a little bit to sort of make sure everything is getting sunlight and being healthy. That's an especially concern in a shady yard, is things that are shaded out by foliage up above is going to be even more of a problem than you're going to have in a really sunny yard, where some of that sunlight is still going to penetrate and get down in there eventually. You know, I've only got like 3 hours of sunlight. I got to make sure everything gets its sun for the day. So keeping a canopy trimmed up enough to get light in there is going to be an important thing in this yard. I can really tell that. So I'm basically trying to find out what's going to take to keep this healthy and happy. You know, this is not a big plant. It's going to be cut back if I was going to stick with this size trunk. I would love to something thicker, like some of these big old, you know, 40-year-old yew in my yard have. I got some with trunks like this in the yard. I can fertilize this a lot, and I can wait 40 more years. That's gonna be a while. I could plant it in the ground and just see if it thickens up. You know, I'm not quite sure yet. I haven't decided what I want to do with this, but I think Japanese yew is going to be a really strong contender. You can already see here, look at the new growth on here. Look at this. This tree is pretty happy here in the shade, right? So I think it's doing okay. We're going to keep on fertilizing, keep on trimming it up just for structure and getting light in there. This is gonna be a tree I think we're gonna really experiment with a lot. This one, it was kind of expensive. I mean, as far as this goes, you know, instead of being the $10 one, I think it was maybe 60 bucks or something like that. I know that's not hugely expensive in the world of bonsai, but for an experiment that I don't know if it's gonna work, I hate to spend much more than that. But it seems like it's working. And I know they go on sale at the end of the year, so I'll be back probably to buy a bunch of these now that I see that it's growing pretty well in my yard. But you know, I have some footage here. Some of these yew bushes in my yard, you can see that they do grow well here. You can see they've got some nice thick trunks. Some of these grew really leggy. I've been trying to cut them back now closer to those trunks and regrow out some finer branching, remove big long cross branches and things like that to make some really nice landscape trees. Maybe I could dig one of those up and make a bonsai out of it. It would leave a big hole in my yard though, which I don't really love the idea of, but that's sort of a decision that has to be made. Do we go ahead and make sort of a shohin size, maybe it's a little bigger than a shohin, you know, size tree out of this garden center type material? Or do you buy some of this garden center material and just stick it in the ground and see what happens with it and plump it up? I'm feeling that pull right now. I see the size of these trunks that I get and I go, man, I just want to throw it in the ground for 5 years. The problem is that puts my little shady experiment here about what can I grow in my yard in container culture, in bonsai culture, that puts that experiment to a screeching halt if I take one of these and I stick it in the ground. So I think I am going to be, you know, potting this one up. Can't do it now, gotta wait till next spring, but I keep it healthy, just do some basic trimming on it over the course of the summer here and into the fall, and get it ready to be replanted in the spring. But you'll be seeing more of this tree. Hopefully this one will be one that someday maybe will be cool and remember this is one of those, you know, yew number 2. We're gonna call this yew number 2 on the channel here, and we'll find out what happens with it more. Now, I do have over here a bench full of other trees. There are a number of different species, some of which make sense in shady bonsai, some that do not, some that have already died since the last video. I did lose one tree, and I'll be talking about why. I don't necessarily think it's because of the shade per se. I still think it might be a viable species, but we'll talk about you know, the process of what it takes to keep these trees alive and which ones are working. And I want to be really honest about which species are working and which ones just aren't. You know, there's gonna be some species I buy that I kind of go, no, this isn't great. Some of these, like this, are things that people have been using for bonsai for a long time. I have some species, like there's an aronia over here I want to show you guys in one of the upcoming episodes. That's not a species people use for bonsai very much. So we're trying some new stuff. Some of it's gonna work, some of it's not, but that's all I got for today. We got starting off just showing you the first yew trees here, and we'll have more coming hopefully soon. It's been a busy summer, been hard to sit down and talk to you guys, but hopefully I'll be back soon with some more trees. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is Shady Bonsai.